Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast, where we demystify the creative process and exchange ideas with career-minded artists. We are your hosts, Adriana and Ameigh.
Jackie Sanders. We're two emerging artists sharing forth the advice and business lessons we have learned along our journey. So if you're not already, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you will be notified when we launch a new episode every Tuesday. And on today's episode, if you are watching this on YouTube, you may see this little different setup than normal. We are back in Adriana's art studio, going to be talking about what she has been up to and recent exciting news that she has been tackling behind the scenes of the podcast. So Adriana, thank you so much for having me in your space today. It feels so nice to record in person rather than through a computer screen.
I know, it does. It's been a while since we've done one of these candid, behind-the-scenes type studio updates, so we figured it was time. It was time. So I guess first things first is I did just recently move studios, which was huge.
Yes. So if our listeners know, we both have community-facing studios in downtown Raleigh, both in the same building, but typically, or in the past, Adriana's studio was 2 studios away from me. Now she's down the hall, still walking distance, so I still get to walk past every day, see her painting. She knocks on my window, but you have a studio all to yourself now, which is so exciting.
I know, I do, and it's also the location of it is just amazing. So
Yes.
My previous studio, which of course I will always love and adore, and also having an amazing studio mate with me, Barb. But where it was located, it was actually behind another studio and down a different hallway. So even some people that, were trying to find me could not find me. So that was always a challenge.
The dungeon.
And yes, or the cave, yeah. And now I like to think of it, now I'm on Main Avenue, on the main thoroughfare. In fact, now it's located, for those of you that are local that are listening, if you come to our space and you're on the 2nd floor, now I'm right in front of the gallery that's upstairs, the gallery space. So that's amazing. So visibility-wise, it's so much easier for people to find me. I will say there is a little bit of a difference in terms of privacy in a way, which you've already, actually, since you came in, you've always had a big window on the main quote-unquote avenue so people can see you while you're working.
It shifts your creative space and your creative practice so much, which I think is, we've talked about a little bit in having a public-facing studio in general, the fact that the community can come into your space, but especially having one on the main walkway strip, when you're saying visibility-wise, exposure-wise, talking to collectors, talking to future collectors, gathering email addresses are all huge benefits. But then you're working super focused in a painting, and either someone comes in or you feel eyeballs in the back of your head.
Oh, yes, you do.
Whoa,
yes,
okay.
So and some people do tap on the glass, and you're just in the middle of a stroke, what? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
It definitely changes it, and so you're probably feeling that a lot more now because you have a window almost the length of her room. You guys can't see it now, but
yeah,
you
one
go
of
to
my
her
walls.
Instagram and go check out pictures of your new space.
Yeah.
See it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's almost one of my walls is a window that leads the hallway, and one of my other walls is actually a window out, towards the outdoors.
Beautiful. So nice.
But being on a 2nd floor, you don't feel peered in, except there are people across the street, but I'm not worried about them, or looking up through the window, but I'm not worried about them. It's more like people that do this number, for those of you listening, the whole cupping your hands around your face looking through glass if the door's closed, and it's oh boy. But at least the way my setup is now, I can see them off the side, as opposed to where I was before. If somebody walked in and say the door was only cracked open, not fully open, and they walked in and I had my headphones on, I wouldn't actually see them until they were all almost on me and scared the living daylights out of me. Mm-hmm. At least where I am now, if they're I don't want to say creeping up, but kind of, I can see them right away, just like they can see me right away.
There aren't many blind spots in your studio, which is definitely different from layout. This room here is more of a large rectangle than the other one. There are a lot of walls in the middle of the space, just being a different space in general, bigger space. There were walls within the room to divide it up and display it on, which is awesome. But yeah, there also were a lot of blind spots. I remember several evenings I would come and we'd be like, okay, we're both going to paint until 7 o'clock and then let's go get food. And she would be dancing in her studio, painting, living her best life. And I'd be like, I don't know how to get your attention without scaring you to death. Because I'm like, hi, hello.
I'm like, ah!
And I'm like, I don't know how to do it besides like throwing something. I don't know.
That would be scary too. I'm
That's
glad you
fair.
did it.
Paintbrush on the floor.
But yeah, it's haunted.
You need a bat signal. Truly a bat cave signal.
That even that could be startling.
Yeah.
So, but I think the main thing was because that one was behind another studio with a tiny little hallway. Even from the perspective of other artists that are here, they didn't necessarily remember to go back that way. And it's not just my studio; there's other studios there. Versus like knowing, okay, maybe I'm dancing while I'm painting, so to speak, but the chances of being seen are much smaller where I am now. Not only is it the main thoroughfare, there's actually a possibility the administrative staff of the building who are on the third floor kind of walkway situation can look down. Not super specific, but they can kind of see if I'm up to no good.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so that's definitely been a huge shift. I know you've mentioned to me since moving into this space. What else has been different? Of course, like we mentioned, it's a solo studio versus a shared studio.
Mm-hmm.
So you have total control over how you want the space to be.
Yep. Which honestly made some of the decisions way harder because it meant I have 1,000 decisions to go
Oh,
through.
interesting. See, I would think you would say easier because then you have full control. It's less of having to ask someone else, but that's fair because I feel like having too much control as creatives, as we know, sometimes it's nice being given a prompt or like rules and parameters that you have to stay in between.
Or you're splitting walls, so you don't have to make hanging decisions on as many walls, only on the ones you're hanging on.
Right.
So it turned into that, and then the other thing that's been, a fun challenge, right? Both fun and challenging, is even though it's bigger than my half of my old studio, the layout is completely different. So from a storage perspective, I actually had to give up a lot in terms of storage because some things just don't fit here, some of my storage shelves and solutions. So there's been a lot of curation of, okay, what can I use that's modular? Almost everything has wheels, thank goodness.
That was very helpful with moving.
That was, you were one of the people that helped me out that fateful day. We're just rolling things up and down the hallway and having a cart, dear Lord, a cart. But that was helpful, but then it becomes that curation challenge of, okay, what do I actually need for my creative practice? Because I do use a lot of materials. I use a lot of different paints in what I create. A lot of it has to do with my creative process and generating ideas. And, if I'm doing warm-ups and things like that, I may not necessarily be grabbing the high-end paint that's going to go on, the layers or the more important layers of my painting. I might be grabbing something else that, I don't know, that I found somewhere, didn't really care for it, but it's going to go in the background, so who cares? Well, that still takes space, and I'm not going to use golden or Liquitex, right, just for playing around. I don't know. That's just not my jam. We feel like it's too precious.
Yeah.
But it can't be as free. So
you have different tools and different materials for different phases of your process and different applications of like even different products.
Exactly.
I mean, there are different benefits. So that's why there are so many amazing materials to choose from, whether you need to be more weather resistant or more whatever, like more texture.
Or the glossy.
Everything has its benefits. Yeah.
Exactly. So the challenge became, okay, how many of these different materials that I used or references, which, like, for example, books, I was like, okay, this is a non-negotiable. My art books need to be here.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, but that's just But it became that challenge of like, okay, what can actually go home, or what can I sell, or what can I donate to another artist?
Yeah.
So that's
an art exchange.
Yeah, doing some sort of exchange. So that's been a big one. How can I fit some of the equipment that I specifically bought for my studio practice? Like, where does my easel go? I have a metal canvas cart that weighs like a small elephant.
But it holds lots of elephants.
It holds over 40 paintings, so it's like it's a non-negotiable.
Worth it. It's hefty, but
it's that versus building something out of wood. But then when I move studios, eventually I'd have to leave it behind. Anyway, it's that whole challenge. I'll say one of the best and most exciting things that I did get. It's a table that's meant for sewing.
Okay.
And it's 3 feet. So right here, not that you can see it, but it's okay. It's basically, when it's fully open, it's 3 feet, 36 inches by about 60 inches, I believe. But when it folds down, it's only 36 by 12. It has wheels, and I can work on it if I'm doing admin work. So I can stand at it, almost use it like a stand-up desk. Mixing paints is very easy on it because it's at a great standing height. But I can also have my studio stool and sit down on it if I need to. But then when we have events like First Friday, which you've probably heard us talk about before, once a month, more volume of people coming in through the doors, then it folds away and I can slap it against the wall and it just opens up so much wall space.
Yeah, and it's that perfect like side table up against the wall, so you can put a little plant on it, a newsletter sign up, and then call it a day, but it's not actually impeding traffic or like it doesn't take up a lot of space.
Exactly.
It's really nice.
It is, because
I didn't realize it was for sewing. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's meant for sewing apparently, or at least that's the main intent of the company that created it. But it actually works perfect for art and our application, where it's like, okay, now it's time. There's an event. There's going to be more foot traffic. Fold it down. It has like the leaves that fold down. Put it away.
Yeah.
You're done. And it has baskets in it. I mean, it's cool.
That's awesome. And I feel like that's a common trend with like art studio spaces in general, but especially when you're moving spaces, of like thinking about the things that you normally look at in a more creative lens. Like if this was marketed as a sewing table, so some people may not even think to look in that section of the store or to search for that. But like I always love going into like Lowe's hardware and like going down different aisles and like, how can I apply this into a painting, into an art product, into a storage solution, like using those big hollow doors that are in the doors section, like next to the front doors, but it's like 6 or 7 feet long by 3 feet deep, and it makes an awesome desk. If you just support it with 2x4s, it makes awesome storage, but you would never, like a table that size would cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And so thinking about like your materials more creatively is super awesome, especially when you're moving. It's like, this is how I use this bookshelf in the old studio. Do you want to simply copy, paste it in the new one? Or is this what used to hold artwork? Is this now going to hold bins with art supplies? Like, and rethinking everything.
That's exactly what
is like so exciting, but also so overwhelming.
It is very overwhelming, which is like, I'm glad that there's been an overlap in terms of the two studios. So it's not like I had to make these decisions in a week. I've had several weeks to be able to overlap, double rent, different stories.
And just moving down the hall too. It's not like you had to like pack it up into the car
and then take it somewhere.
Yeah, you could truly like pick up a shelf off the wall and carry it with the bottles of paint still on it. You're like, great, this is your new home now.
Exactly.
That makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and I have like this red folding cart meant for camping. See, there we go, multi-purpose everything.
Everything's up for grabs if you're an artist.
Yeah, pretty much.
I can use anything.
Yeah, we're adaptable. We're always evolving. But it turned into like I would do little excursions. I would wait usually when there's not too many artists in the building because you could hear that thing rattling through our wood floor. But I would just take my little red cart, go down the hallway, grab things from my other studio, dump them in the cart, and then come back and find them at home. But a lot of it, it was a lot of Marie Kondo style with a lot of things of like, okay, does this spark joy? Do I actually need it, or is it nice to have? Or
is this paint color that like I like in theory, and one day maybe I'll hopefully use it, but I actually haven't used it in like a year? Or is this truly one of the core materials? It needs to be in hand's reach at all times. It needs to be on the active painting cart, not in storage.
Exactly.
It like really makes you reassess everything, every tool, every color, every material, and even just like the workflow of the space too. Because you definitely
made a huge difference.
You definitely were very intentional with the space, which I very much appreciate because as our listeners know and fellow artist friends, like I'm very much influenced by the spaces that I work in, and I need like my stations and I need the workflow, and I love having things organized. So you were very intentional with that coming in and having active working space, but also storage space too.
Yeah, I wanted that division too, so that's something that was challenging and not necessarily pre-existing in the space when I moved in. So the previous artist that had the space had it very open, completely open, also in terms of material. From what I could glean, it didn't seem like she used as much as I do. I mean, it's no joke when Jackie likes to joke, I have an art store in here. Yeah, sounds about right. I have a lot of different brands of mediums and even paint colors and things that I use in my practice books, references, all kinds of things. a hardware store.
Yeah,
Like,
the other artist had a very curated materials from what we could tell.
From what we could tell.
She like had very fine-tuned her style and her like the content
and
of what
exactly
she was making.
Yeah. It probably felt like it probably fit in a small box.
Yeah.
Most of her paints, whereas mine, I need shelves. So one thing coming into the space that was a challenge, I was like, wait, this is just one open box, which is great, but where am I going to put all my stuff?
Right.
And without cluttering the view of that potential collector or visitor, where they can see basically. I mean, it's okay. Don't get me wrong. This is something that, one of our fellow artists does all the time too. This is a working studio, not a gallery.
Right.
So you can see the materials, and that is part of the process. And in fact, a lot of people find it, I think, even more fascinating.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things like about this art space where we both had studios is that's what the purpose of it is, to both see artwork but also get to meet the artist behind the artwork and see the spaces in which these pieces were created.
Exactly.
So like it is a working studio. However, you also want to make sure like for events like First Friday, or if we have a specific concert going on or an exhibition that's opening, that like you can clean up the studio, so to speak, put the best foot presentation-wise forward, and that you don't have anything that's like a huge eyesore that's distracting from the work itself. So it definitely is a balancing of function of like you want to be functional as a working studio and not inhibiting your creative process, but you also want to have a heightened customer experience and a visitor experience to where they can actually experience the painting and not just remember the like pile of scrap paper in the corner, like from the overflowing trash can.
Hazard.
Like,
yeah, let's not do that. Which, again, to each their own. There's all kinds of studios and all kinds of artists. Organization systems, if we can kindly call them that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that turned into part of the challenge. So I wanted to repeat a little bit of what was in my previous studio in making somewhat of that division between storage area versus working area versus display area. So for those that are watching the video version of this, the back behind us is the display area, aka the gallery walls, if I could call them that. On the opposite end that you can't see of the screen is my working area, so that's where my big easel is at. I think it's 10-footers. I think it's kind of big. But that's the working area. That's where I have like a drop cloth tacked onto the bottom, to the floor, just in case it spills, and there's more of my paint supplies. But then I got really lucky in the space that there was actually a movable wall that was hidden behind, it looked like it was hidden behind another wall. Turns out we were able to move it and create that additional separation so that I could put shelving behind it. So can a visitor see it? Of course. There's nothing stopping them from like peeking out the back. But if they're looking at my gallery area, my display area, it's not distracting. Yeah. So all those, gallons of paint and canvases and all those things on the cart, they're on the other side. Like you'd actually have to walk around. So that was definitely, oh God, it's been such a challenge.
Yeah.
But also fun. Like, it's fun reorganizing.
And it's definitely like a big puzzle too, which I think back when we both had either other studios or even like home studios. I feel like whether you have a community facing studio, a public facing studio, a home studio, a cart that you put up to your kitchen table, like you still need all of these elements. You need a storage area for extra supplies, finished paintings, purely storage. You need a functional area to, where's the most used supplies, things you need to have on your fingertips when you're in your creative zone, but then also a display area. And so if you have a home studio, this may be a single wall, it may be
just for photos.
It may be a corner that has a chair and a plant in it that like with one hook above it that you keep replacing the paintings on. You almost think of that as the like Instagram photo
friendly,
where like of course the creative process is also beautiful. You can make different photos, but it's nice having one place where you can, I'm gonna hang this painting up, take a quick clean photo, and that takes into account element or lights and all those different things. But those, I think, are the three main things you have to consider.
Or main stations. Oh, and let's not forget cleanup. Yeah, you also need cleanup area. So that was the other part, like the setup for the cleaning, storage area. It's like a different thing, different set of shelvings and counter space. So it was also
how you're gonna clean your materials, how you're gonna dry them, where are your brushes gonna dry after you just did an intense painting session.
Oh, and where were my plants gonna go? That's an important one for me too. It was kind of like I have some that are suffering a little bit because they're on the windowsill, and before they got a little more in direct light, and now the different side of the
very
building.
direct light.
Some of them are getting a little crispy.
Yeah,
but that's okay. That's all part of it. And I'm also like the ones I put on the windowsill are the ones that if you don't survive, I'm okay. But the precious ones, I know it sounds mean, but the precious ones get in direct light and they're happy and they're booming. And
I have a few like that. You're way better with plants than I am. Small side tangent. You're way better with plants than I am. You have like that whole knowledge. And I'm like, I remember I was on vacation one time and Adriana was like, hey, do you want me to water your plants? And I'm like, literally that didn't even cross my mind as a concern in my brain. I'm like, next time I'm in there, maybe if I remember, I'll do it. They would have died. Like literally I was gone for like 2-3 weeks. But I definitely have some too where like it looks really cute on my windowsill. I got like this little figurine man. And like I pour my coffee over there and it's beautiful, but I'm like, there's definitely days where I have to like bring it into my studio. I'm like, come in the shade, little sweetheart. Like you can come over while I'm painting and join me in the studio so you don't crisp up too much.
Exactly. So that's the other part of it, of course. I mean, this is like the cherry on top part of the conversation. Yeah, that's the fun
sprinkle part. Like
it is like little decorative pieces. Like some of my plants got brand new pots to them, or they got switched around what pot they were in, what planter they were in. So that's part of the cute, fun part of it too. So yeah, it's taken me some time to kind of get the rhythm. I think what helped me was in my previous studio, I already had an idea that I was moving as soon as there was an available solo space. So one thing I did do kind of to train myself in advance was
smart.
I moved some of my easel, cards with paints and things like that towards the corner of that studio, almost like mimicking. I was like, what if where I move next is very limited? What is the minimum amount of space that I need to create paintings that are, say, like 4 feet, right? And it was kind of like, what would that setup look like? So I kind of practiced that in advance of even moving.
Yeah, like giving yourself parameters of like, what would this workflow look like, feel like before committing to the smaller space. Yeah, because that's huge too. Because there may be instances where you're like, maybe you truly could not have made it work. Where like you need X amount big space.
Exactly.
And or the opposite. Maybe you think you need this huge space and you're paying, I don't know, triple in rent or whatever allocated home studio space. I need this entire room. And you're like, I actually only realistically need this half or this quarter of it. So understanding those parameters and like pushing yourself one way or the other is really smart.
It was definitely practice of like, can I make it work? Because at the time I knew that when my lease term was over, I was moving into a solo studio, and sharing a studio has been awesome. Don't get me wrong. But I was at that point of like, I'm bursting at the seams and I want to set it up a little bit different. And have that freedom to change it however I want, whenever I want, which nothing wrong with that. But it did turn into, I didn't know at the time what studio space was going to actually become available, whether it was going to be bigger than my half of where I was before, or if it was going to be smaller. Was it going to be like long and narrow? Was it going to be a big square? Was it going to be like weird angles?
You don't know.
I had no idea. And I actually got lucky that the person that was in the studio I'm in now moved out early to move to another studio space in another building. So it actually worked out. I did have first rights of refusal, so I was able to move in. Thank goodness. And the setup, it's a beautiful space, beautiful window. I have to paint by the light. I'm one of those people. So I'm like, it has great light in it. It has great energy in it. So it worked out. Yeah. It worked out. But in the middle of all of this, of course, 5 billion projects, of course, but part of what I've been working on as well is a new series. Because,
because why not? So if you're on the YouTube video right now, you can see a handful of the paintings behind us, or corners of them, but definitely go to Adriana's Instagram if you're listening to this in real time. Then Ameigh Art on Instagram. And yeah, she's been crushing it from the painting standpoint. It's like, all of these things, definitely they're all excels under pressure. Yep, all paintings since the beginning of the year. So why don't you go ahead and tell them, so one, you started with a 30-day challenge. right?
31 paintings in 31
31
days.
paintings in 31 days,
Yep.
which you've done before. And so I feel like that is what really kicked it off, and you just didn't stop, which you tend to have the momentum to do.
Well, it's been challenging because, okay, so I have this goal. We've talked about this in the past, but in case it's the first time you've been hearing our podcast, I have this goal. I'm sure you've all heard this. You know, there's no shortcut to excellence. I guess that's the way some people put it. But in painting terms, you're going to make 99 not so great paintings before you make a good one. And obviously, as you move through your career, that number shrinks, how many you got to do that are okay before you get to that really good one that you fall in love with. So I have this belief that I just have to, and it's not a belief, it's proven.
Just
Never
make
mind.
more paintings in more time.
Yeah, you have
less
to make
time.
more. There's no shortcut. You have to make more, and that's how you evolve. You just got to keep going. So I have this self-imposed challenge, if you will. Discipline. Actually, it's discipline, where I have a goal of making at least 3 paintings every week, and they can be very small, like 4x4 fits in the palm of your hand, or they can be 4 feet. In terms of my parameters, that's not the important thing. It's more how many I'm moving through and I'm working through, as opposed to size, right? And then the other thing about it is when I say 3, it's 3 finished. So whether they started in another month or 6 months ago or a year ago, and they finished this month, I'm not that worried about it. Is how many did I finish this month, where I had to shift from that right brain side for a moment, go left brain and say, is it done or is it not?
Right.
Which is a different episode, of course, on when is a painting finished. But essentially that shift from, oh, this was fun, to more like, okay, can I sign it? Can I like varnish it? Can I put the hanging hardware? Like, is it ready to find its new home? And that is sometimes something that's easy for some creatives to procrastinate, because we're in the fun part, and then we get stuck, and then it's hard to get to that last finishing, crossing the finishing line. So that's part of my self-imposed or my self-discipline, is to say I need to do that at least 3 times a week, where I go through that process of like, okay, we have to. It's easy to start. We have to finish, right? So what I did, as we do, was January. I didn't start January 1st. I started a few days later, recovering from being sick. Anyway, that's a whole different story. We're not going into that.
The end of the new year, I feel like that was like a common theme this year. Where it's like the first week of the new year's like doesn't count. Like not even from like a New Year's standpoint, but just like holiday recovery, like social overload recovery from like holiday things and
preparing.
We had like a lot of open studio time during that time too, and so just like total overload. And and everyone just getting like head colds and sicknesses, and
it was a lot. It was a lot. So I started, I think, first or maybe second week of January.
Middle of January.
Yeah, give or take. And I just basically said, okay, I know this challenge. I've done it in the past where it was January 1st till January 31st. But this time I was like, I got to give myself some grace. It doesn't matter if I finish in February. What matters is, can I do 31 paintings in 31 days? And it doesn't mean 1 per day necessarily. Some days I'll have the energy and the time to finish 3. But then there might be 3 days where I don't finish any.
Right, but you lay layers on other ones.
Exactly. And kind of my goal was, I'm going to take a lot of these paintings that over the years I've been creating, some of which I've never finished. This is my opportunity to bring them,
which is awesome,
again to the easel and basically say, okay, what do we have to do to finish you, or we're painting you over.
Yeah.
Like it's a tough call, but it's like you either work with a series that I was developing, which, I started to work on actually months ago, but in terms of painting them, I started this year, 2022.
Yeah.
So it became the question of like, okay, can I do it? So I did get to the end of the 31 days. I did have 31 paintings, or 32 or 33. Anyways, I'll count. And then I was like, oh, I love this energy. I got to keep going, do 3 a week. And then of course I started moving studios, and then I have to go back and do my count and see how many. February,
but it's so
March,
cool.
But
it's so cool too, though. Like seeing it's like a new space and this new series. That's definitely like in line style-wise with previous work that you've done. It's just like another iteration of it, as a series should be, like from a cohesive standpoint. But I think it's also seeing new work in a new space. It's just like this new beginning. I feel like for you creatively and your creative process. But then also, like, as a observer of it, it's also really nice too, because you then get to like show off this new series
in a new space. Yeah, and it's like when I started the series, I wasn't thinking about moving to a new space either.
No.
Like this series, some of the concept drawings or studies that I did for them, some of them are as old as 2 years, and I had never actually painted them. They're just like in digital form or in a sketchbook.
Digital sketches, yeah.
Yeah, so it was very interesting that this coincided, me like unveiling this, moving.
They weren't ready to come to life yet.
Yeah.
They just needed some time.
Yeah, and it's extra challenges too, because it's like the other thing I was doing with this, it's called Visions in Color. Share that part of it. It's called Visions in Color, and my previous series was calling Exploring Heritage, which had to do with my background, where I grew up, and kind of the fact that I'm mixed and from different races and different challenges they've gone, through time. And there's a little bit of heaviness to it, but also very positive and optimistic. So what I wanted to do with the series was kind of refine on that concept a little bit and just focus on basically the generation of joy, if you can call it that. Sorry if it sounds cliche, but there we go.
Yeah.
Kind of like, can I bring a smile to myself and to someone else, and whoever's watching it? It's cheerful and it's playful and it's bright and it's energetic, and it's just bubbly and popping, and it's just fun. Like, I just want them to be fun and full of music and movement and just like, woo! Like, yeah, that's kind of like the energy I want to bring across, but as we do, because we don't make things simple for ourselves ever. Why would we? Some artists like find a style and then they do the same style over and over. No, I need to make it harder on myself because challenge accepted.
Yeah.
So part of what I decided to do with this one was kind of incorporate a bigger range of colors than I had been so far. I tend to lean towards the cool colors of the spectrum, lots of blues, lots of greens, corals and magentas and like purpley colors. And this time the challenge was, can I incorporate more yellow and orange?
And orange!
Oh, I know.
Yes.
Jackie's a huge fan. But without making it look rainbow necessarily.
Right.
Which, again, nothing wrong with that. But it was kind of like, can I do it with my take on the palette, and what would that look like?
Right.
And pre-mixing some of the colors, like custom colors to go with the series. And it turned into, how can I refine the previous concept into this, but wait, there's more, of course, without repeating any one given color more than maybe 2 times, so that for the painting to work, the values, the shape, the design of it, the composition has to be done in such a way that your eye will still navigate, but it's not dependent on the color. And using one color of each thing, or very limited versions, instead of like, oh, I want, red, it's here,
right,
throughout the painting. Instead, red only goes on this spot. So once you settle with that, it's done, right?
But tonally, it has to read and navigate the eye in an appropriate way.
Exactly. And have some shades of different colors that go with each other, and kind of like some gradient, almost saturation going on. Anyway, again, making it complicated.
Again, parameters that we put on ourselves, which if there are other artists that are listening to this, these are things that sometimes you can share with the collector or not. Sometimes I feel like as artists, we have these like prompts that we set for ourselves. Sometimes they're relevant for the collector or the viewer to know. Sometimes they're not. And it really depends on the collector. It depends on the audience.
But it depends what kind of artist you are too.
Right. And like we were saying earlier, we kind of like having parameters or like assignments, so to speak, of like, what's every solution I can do for this problem? And here's a set of prompts. Now make 50 paintings that solve this. Well, other artists say like, that reminds me way too much of school. I don't want anyone to tell me what to do, including myself, because we do that to ourselves too. Like, I'm rebelling versus someone telling me what to do. And like, you're the one
of each thing.
You're the one telling yourself what to do.
Which, if you think about it, that's a parameter too.
True.
In a way.
It's like, I'm actively to choose not to do my own assignment.
Yeah.
Take that.
Yeah. My only rule is to break the rules. That's still a rule. Anyway.
But all that being said, with like setting these parameters.
Yeah. And then it turned into, okay, using these new parameters, can I do it where the painting can be non-representative, or Or, and this is part of the challenge, using the same style and the same color, or same process, I should say, and the same colors, can I also make something representative or somewhat that you can recognize using the same rules?
Yeah.
And it's literally been like a puzzle piece. In fact, some of my paintings, people look at it and they're like, they kind of look like puzzle pieces. I'm like, that's right.
They do.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Or like painted collage. They're like, did you cut it out and paste it? I'm like, no, that's paint. Everything's paint. But it turned into, can I refine my style to such a point that using similar process, similar colors, and some similar parameters, my style can refine to a way that I can paint whatever I want,
right?
And it can still hang next to each other, and there's no dissonance.
The subject matter can change.
Or even whether it's representative at all or not.
Right.
So I can have a landscape next to a flower, next to a raven, next to a cat,
next to a totally abstract, atmospheric type painting,
and they all go with each other.
Like, that's the end goal that you're working towards.
This has been my life source, so to speak. I've always been into like, can I, like one of the artists in history, right, that I look up to, that I'm just like, heart is one of my favorites, is Vincent. And for me, Vincent, one of the things that I found exciting about him is later on in his career, he got to a point where he could paint anything, and you knew it was him. He could paint a cat, he could paint an orange, he could paint a sky, he could paint a flower. It didn't matter.
Right.
Process-wise, he had honed it down to such a point that you didn't say, oh, Vincent is just a portrait artist.
Right.
He could do portraits, but that's not all he did.
Yeah.
And you could hang his work, right, especially certain time periods, you could hang his work with all these different subjects. It was still him.
Right.
So that's been a challenge for me through my life of like, because when I used to do this before, a flower, a cat, a landscape, people would say, oh, how many people did that?
Yeah,
and
I feel like,
together.
Yeah, and like all artists go through that phase, especially in the beginning, when you're trying out new styles, trying out new mediums, taking lots of workshops, maybe in classes, in person, or just online on YouTube. So they all look different, which is awesome for like honing in those skills.
Yep.
But yeah, you're right, where it's like, okay, well, what are those, these are Adriana Ameigh painting differentiators that no matter what it's applied to, then you'll know that it's cohesive. And I feel like that's the one thing so many artists are searching for, where it's like, I need to find my style, quote unquote. And it takes a long time to get there.
Yes, it does.
And it just takes repetition and practice, and
a lot of painting.
A lot of painting, but also that evaluation too of making intentional either assignments for yourself. Mm-hmm. Do I like this? Do I not like this? And there's going to be a lot of times where either you set an assignment for yourself or someone else does, and you're like, I absolutely hate this. I'm miserable. And you stop mid, what is a week challenge, a 30-day challenge. You're like, I hate this. I'm stopping. And a lot of artists make it as a failure. Like, you're learning, well, what didn't you like about it? Was it a time restraint? Was it a subject matter restraint? Was it a little bit longer? Right. You're like, is this a creative block I need to push through? Or is there truly something that, like, you can then learn a one style that you don't like working in? And why didn't you like that? Maybe that gives you a direction or a light towards why you want to work in this other style.
Exactly.
So being like, also think like very conscious of your point of view in the experience, what do you like, what do you not like, and trusting that, which is super, super difficult, especially when you feel as though like, oh, well, so-and-so told me I should be doing this. Or my Aunt Susie said this one thing is super popular, so I have to. Or a professor, true. And it's definitely like learning that confidence of trusting your own voice and figuring out like why, as cheesy as it sounds, like why do you make art? What's your purpose behind it? Is it a message that you're trying to share with the world and get out of you? Is it a message you want to share with other people? Is it an aesthetic that you really like and just want to be surrounded by?
Are you process oriented?
Like, is there a certain part of your process that like
drives you?
Yeah, that wouldn't be the same outcome of a painting without that part of the process. Or like that's your therapy aspect of it. Which is like a whole other rabbit hole conversation. But I think that's a huge thing of like also having that filtering of what do you want to be known for? And like what visually, conceptually, energy wise, and really just like leaning into that and like, okay, what's the extreme version of that?
And I'm glad you brought that up because I'm big into the whole like, okay, legacy wise,
Yeah.
What am I leaving behind? Which we've talked about in the past. We had an episode about documenting your work, so we covered some of that there. But essentially, like knowing what are your carry-through elements, what are those things that distinguish what you do that you absolutely love, that even if you didn't sell your paintings or didn't show them to anybody, from a process perspective, I am definitely a process-oriented artist. There are certain things that I just do and I have to do. And it's like once I fell in love with, you know, the way certain texture, yeah, of course we're going to texture. Texture is one of my favorites, and color mixing. Oh Jesus, I love color mixing. So like certain things about color, certain things about the tactile texture of the work, but then also another episode we talked about going big.
Yeah.
It's also like editing and modifying my process ever so slightly where it still feels like me without compromising what I want to do, but also having that goal in mind of like, how can I take these carry through elements? And if I wanted this concept, this painting, this design, whatever you want to call it, to end up on the side of a paint, like of a building, right? A mural or something that gets printed out huge, or on a product or whatever it is, gets licensed out. How can I make sure that I do it in such a way that it translates well for that too?
Yeah.
So it's been a big shift. Just kind of moving some things around of like, okay, this step of my process, can I do it at stage, you know, if there were steps, right? Whatever. Can I do this at step 7 instead of step 4? And just kind of moving that all around. But anyway, we definitely need to make an episode all about finding your style.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That's definitely something we talk about a lot in our Level Up Artist membership with our members. We have weekly live calls, and that always inevitably comes up on our conversation. But yeah, we'll definitely add that to the list. Now that we've broken episode 50, we'll have an ongoing list of episode ideas. So if you guys have any other episode ideas, please let us know. You can find us both on social media as well as at Level Up Artist. But why don't you go ahead and show them or tell them where they can find you, as well as see all these beautiful pictures of your new studio.
Thank you. So you can find my work at ameighart.com, and everything will be listed in the show notes, of course, and on social media, all my handles are Ameighart as well.
Awesome. And if you want to see my work, see my studio space, my website is www.jacquelinesanders.com, and social media, I'm at jsandersstudio. So, Adriana, thank you so much for having us in your studio today. I love it. It's so much fun recording with you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'm playing like host today. Love it.
I know, pretty much. It's been amazing. Thank you again, everybody. And if you have any questions,
Awesome. We'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.